Hello everyone, so today I am reviewing the Smashbox Full Exposure Palette. I've had this palette for about a month now, so I've been playing around with it a bit because I really wanted to give it a fair review. So I've had so many mixed reviews on this palette. Before I bought this, I went online and I had a look at other reviews. There were so many people saying that the pigments weren't great on the shimmers, so I was slightly concerned about buying this palette. But then I would come across the comments where people were saying this was the best palette they've ever tried, they had no problem with pigmentation, and that they just thought it was a really great product. So I just decided to go out, buy it, and then try to see for myself. So let's start with the packaging. When you buy your palette, it will come in a cardboard box that looks like this. It says it includes a get the looks for your eye shape, which is like a leaflet that it comes with. I'll show you that in a second. And then you've got a bonus full exposure mascara that comes in there as well. Now on the back it says that there are essential 14 must-have neutral shades from nudes to blacks in the most blendable formulas. Effortless crease resistant long wearing shimmers in the top row and velvety smooth mattes along the bottom. Also includes a double-ended brush, one side for shimmer and one side for mattes. So when you open this you'll find a mini Smashbox Full Exposure Mascara, and that's your brush. It's a full size brush. This mascara was okay, I have tried this. I did find towards the end of the day it seemed to transfer onto the bottom of my eyes. That's a slight problem I had with that mascara. And then they include this really cool chart, and basically you can identify your eye shape, and then they have little tutorials that you can use to create a look, so that's really cool. So onto the palette itself, it's matte black, and then you've got the holographic writing saying the Smashbox Full Exposure, and then on the back you have this little chart here, and this tells you what the colours in the palette are. So they don't have names, they just have S1, S2, S3, S for shimmers, and then M for mattes, M1, M2, M3, and so on. So when you come to open this, this is what you'll find. So there's some really beautiful neutral colours in there, and you've got the top row of shimmers, the bottom row of mattes, and then you have this really cool double-ended brush. So that's the matte side, so it's like a fluffy brush, and then this is the shimmer side. One side's black, one side's white, so you can use two colours on either side, which is really cool. For the matte side, I tend to use the shimmer side as well, just to kind of pack it on more, and I actually like this matte side for blending. So this palette sets you back £36. That's not bad considering it includes a mascara, a brush, and 14 shades inside your palette. But for that kind of price, you expect these eyeshadows to be really good quality, and that's not necessarily what a lot of the reviews were saying about it. So what I've done for you is I've not only swatched these on my arm with no primer whatsoever, I've also put each of the colours except these two highlight colours on the eyes with my Urban Decay primer potion, just to show you what kind of colour payoff you'll get on the eye. Firstly, we're going to be talking about this one here, which is S1, and this is described as a chocolate brown with a golden pearl. As you can see on the swatch here, without the primer, mostly that shimmer that you can see. But when I put this on my eye with the primer, I did start to see that really nice chocolate brown colour. I really liked the way this looked on the eyes, and it blended out really nicely. Here we have S2, which is described as a deep golden brown with gold pearl. On the swatch, again, just like S1, not too much of a colour payoff to be honest, but once I popped it over that primer on my eye, I wouldn't say it was a deep golden brown. This one comes off as more of a beigey champagne type colour on the eye rather than a deep golden brown. But again, I really liked the way this blended, and I liked the way this looked on the eye over the primer. So then we have S3, which is described as a soft gold with gold and silver pearl. I'm afraid the swatch is a little bit dark, so I apologise for that, but you can mainly just see glitter. I didn't really see much colour at all. When I popped this on my eye over the primer, it did go on really nicely, but it is very much a barely there shade. It's almost like a wash of very light colour. So I wasn't too impressed with the colour payoff for this one, and this is where this palette may have slightly gone a little bit downhill for me. Then we have S4 here, which is described as a light tan with gold and silver pearl. Now, I didn't pop this one on my eye because it's so light it just wouldn't have shown, but I'll try and show you on my hand if I can. It's just a really nice colour for highlighting, and this doesn't really have any shimmer in, it's more of a pearly type colour. We are moving on to S5. S5 is described as a golden wheat with gold pearl. When you swatch this, hardly any colour comes off at all. And then on the eye, over primer. It's quite patchy. I couldn't seem to get an even colour on my eye. It was a bit wishy-washy and it just didn't perform very well in my opinion. Now we're moving on to S6. I really don't like the texture of S6. It's also the only one that's full of really chunky glitter. Don't know if you can see, there's some really chunky pieces in there. I don't mind so much because I quite like glitter, but the thing is with it is there's hardly any pigmentation in that colour, to be honest. The problem is with it's described as a mid-tone slate with silver pearl, and you do expect that mid-tone slate type colour, but when I swatched this again, just like S5, there was hardly any pigmentation in this. And even worse, when I popped this on my eye, this was the one where it just showed those huge chunks of glitter and not really any colour. And I got to this point in the palette where I started to see what people were talking about as far as the eyeshadows were concerned with their lack of colour payoff. But the saviour of the shimmers is this one here, S7. This is probably my favourite eyeshadow in the palette. It is described as a rich grey with multicolour and silver pearl. As you can see on the swatch, it comes up beautifully. There's no problem with pigmentation. It's full of shimmer, but it's also full of colour. And then on the eye, I'm sorry, this picture's a little bit soft, but it just comes off beautifully. It's one of my favourite colours. It does look a little bit darker than this in real life, if I'm honest. It looks a lot more pigmented than this photo. It doesn't really do it justice. It's just an idea to show you what the colour payoff is. But this is definitely the winner of the shimmers in this palette. So now we are moving on to the bottom row here, the mattes. The mattes are definitely the stars of this palette. They feel really nice, really soft. Let me take you through those. So we have M1 here, which is a matte warm chocolate brown, and it swatches beautifully without primer. On the eyes you can see that it blends really nicely. It has good pigmentation. It is a very nice warm brown. And we have M2 here, which is a matte mid-tone brown. Again, it's swatched okay for quite a light colour. Not the best colour payoff on the eye for this one, very light. But I like this colour. It's one of those colours where I think if you don't necessarily want to look like you're wearing lots and lots of makeup, this is definitely a colour that I would go to try and achieve that look. Then we're moving on to M3. Now these two colours here are very similar to each other. I really feel like I've almost got two of the same colours, but one's just slightly darker than the other. And it has a slightly more orangey tone to it. So then we are on to matte 4, which is a creamy matte beige. Let me just swatch that one for you. So again, this makes a great highlight colour, especially if you don't want the shimmery highlight. It's just there. I love both the highlight colours in this palette. I think they perform really nicely, and I think it's great that you've got that option of a shimmer highlight or a matte highlight. So we have M5 here, and this is described as a soft light taupe. I actually found this very similar to these two down the end. Then we have M6, which is an ashy dark brown. So this is another one of the mattes I really liked. Again, quite similar to the first brown that I showed you. Great pigmentation and nice and blended. And then we come to the last colour in the palette, which is M7, and this is described as a suede black. To me this comes off more as a charcoal black, which you can see in the swatches, and then on the eyes. Again, this is probably my favourite matte colour, so it's actually the darkest shimmer and the darkest matte that are my two favourite colours in this palette. So you've seen the palette, you've seen the colours, you've seen the swatches, you've seen what they come across like on the eyes. Now I'm going to tell you what I really think of this palette. I have got a few problems with it, to be honest. I find that a lot of the colours will come up very similar, so I almost feel like you don't necessarily have too much of a choice of what you could do with this. These two shimmers here, very similar, same as these two colours here, and even though this looks darker, this comes off very similar to these two down here as well. And then you've got this darker brown and this brown here, which again, they come up very similar. So I just feel like it's a bit of a samey palette. The other major problem I have with this is the lack of pigmentation, especially in these two shades here. I didn't really get any colour at all, the same as with this colour here. It's not all bad, there are a few stars in this palette, like I say. The two darker shades at the end. I do like these two here, and the second shimmer in here. And I also love the highlight colours, and like I said earlier, I really like the fact that you've got a matte option or a shimmer option. So I like 7 eyeshadows out of 14, which means you could put all the eyeshadows I like in the bottom row forget about the rest, and I paid £36 for half the shades. So a lot of people are comparing it to the Naked palette, which I'm holding below here. There are some very similar colours in there. The difference between these is that the Naked palette only has a couple of mattes in there, whereas with the Smashbox Full Exposure you're getting half and half. With the Naked palette I think it was £37 for 12 shades and a brush, and with your Full Exposure palette you get 14 shades, a mascara, a little helpful booklet and a double-ended brush. So you would think that you were getting more for your money with this palette, but because the colours come off a bit wishy-washy, I would actually recommend this over your Full Exposure palette. Urban Decay are one of my favourite companies anyway. This isn't an Urban Decay review, this is just a straight comparison, to be honest. So if you were going to ask me if this was a palette that I would recommend, personally, probably not, because I think there are other neutral palettes out there. The market's oversaturated with neutral palettes at the moment, but there are others that they just perform so much better. So unfortunately, as much as I do love some of the colours in here, it's definitely not winning palette of the year because of those few problems. And I'm kind of in the middle of what people are saying about this palette, where some people really love it and then some people really don't like it. I feel like I'm kind of in the middle somewhere because I love some of the shades, but I could really do without some of the other eyeshadows, and I really think they could have done a better job with their pigmentation, especially as they do say that these are highly pigmented. I just personally, I don't find that to be true. Anyway, I hope that's helped you a little bit. I can leave you links as to where you can buy this if you're interested. If you have a Smashbox counter near you, definitely go and swatch these and see what you think of them. Let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me, or even if you found a better way to apply these. Just leave me a comment below. So if you're still deciding whether you want this palette, I hope this has helped you even just a little bit, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.